Good morning. Welcome to King Sports News Hour for the 20 in the 12th month, in the 16th year of Chungi. And OSDP next Wednesday will be in the new year where we leave off today. Uh, so this is an OSDP lecture, and I believe this is the same you can play. All right, so just look to be a servant, a mission, it had the mission of servant, and also to praise and worship God. And then the motivation and process of the fall. We're going to talk about that today. So God created the heaven and the earth. He created the angelic world, and he created the physical world. And the angels were created first, and the physical world was created with the help of or with the assistance, shall I say, not necessarily help, but with the assistance of the uh, of the angels. Part of the mission of the angels is to be a servant, and so they served God in many ways while He was creating the physical world, and they were certainly there as witnesses. And but then when the human beings came into being, when Adam and Eve came about, many years later, perhaps billions of years later, after the heavenly angelic world was first created, then Lucifer, the archangel, who is symbolically represented in Genesis as the serpent, felt a reduction of love. And in a sense, this was only natural, I would have to say, because in a sense, this was only natural. That Lucifer would feel this way. And so that is why God gave the word to Adam and Eve. Said, listen, when just don't eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But and as I mentioned last week, everything in God's creation has a desire to get closer to God. And so in order to do that, they serve a higher purpose. They sacrifice themselves for a higher purpose. So for example, then uh, the even down to the particles, the positive and negative, negatively charged subatomic particles come together to form atoms, and then um, the atoms come together to form molecules, and molecules come together to form, well, various minerals and plants and so forth, and these serve a purpose. They serve the higher purpose as well until finally you get to plants that are eaten by animals, and animals are eaten by human beings, all coming closer to God as they serve this higher purpose. And so, also the archangel Lucifer had this desire to come closer to God, and yet now he saw that there was another layer. There was another layer in the creation between him and God. And if things worked out, this would actually be a better situation for him, because then Adam and Eve would love him not only with God's love, but with their own love as well. And so he would actually experience more love. But in the short term, the archangel quite naturally felt a reduction of love. And so the archangel approached Eve, and Eve was supposed to know better. And we see in Genesis 3 that actually she did know better. And Genesis 3:2, it says, and the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, ye shall not eat of it, neither shall he touch it lest he die. And Father has also told us that God gave the commandment uh, that he gave in Genesis 2:18, is it? No, I'm sorry, not 2:18. In 2:17, sorry, 2:17, that God gave the commandment not only once in 2:7 in Genesis 2:17, but many, many times. And Father has said that God was concerned because there was only one female figure in the garden, but there were, I think, something like five male figures, right? There was Adam, but there's also the three archangels, and there's God. So five male figures in the garden. So Eve was alone in terms of being a female figure. And so he was quite concerned, and so he gave this commandment multiple times. In the formulation that he used most often in the um, later years of his presence in his physical body, as I recall, is that he would say that Eve committed the fall and Adam failed to fulfill his portion of responsibility. Right? Adam, you know, could have been there, should have been there, but also Eve knew very well that she needed to stay away from this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. She had to keep it away from the archangel. So there was a feeling of reduction of love, and that was the motivation of the spiritual fall. And then the process then was that Eve and the archangel committed sex. They had sexual intercourse. The archangel had a penis, and that penis penetrated Eve, and that was the process of the spiritual fall. And then for the physical fall was the fall between Eve and Adam, because then Eve went to Adam thinking apparently that by uniting with Adam that she would be able to return to God, because she now realized that Adam was her true mate, that Adam was to be her husband, and that she had the knowledge now. She had the knowledge now that this was supposed to be God's will, and so she went to Adam and seduced Adam and caused Adam to join her in committing the physical fall. In other words, they had sexual intercourse. Adam's penis penetrated Eve. So this was the physical fall, and both of these occur in the Bible, of course, in Genesis chapter 3, verse 6. So the effect of the spiritual fall was that there was a guilty conscience, fear and dread and anxiety, and also she gained the angel's wisdom. And then in the physical fall, inherited the nature of the archangel at the time of the fall. In other words, the fallen nature came about then and they both became children of Satan. In other words, they placed themselves under the dominion of Satan as a result of these two acts of sexual intercourse that had not been blessed by God, that were committed not under God's blessing, but rather centering on themselves and centering on the archangel. It was centered on the archangel. So they became children of Satan in their lineage, and the Satan became the master of the world, because Adam and Eve were at the pinnacle of God's creation. And so by conquering the pinnacle, the archangel now conquered the entire world, the entire creation of God, the physical world and spiritual world. And this is why archangels' organizations in human history have always been these pyramid organizations where whoever is at the pinnacle then gets to control the whole thing. And so kingdoms were based on what? They were based on power, on strength. Who had the most guns, or who had, in the beginning, I suppose, who had the biggest rock, or who had the biggest club, and then eventually, once gunpowder was invented, who had the biggest gun, or who had the most amount of money. But the money basically came from the big rock or the big club or the big gun. So basically, it's the same thing. Okay. The apex predator is able to take whatever they want with the lethal force or the threat of lethal force. And this is why the Chattanooga Constitution says we're not going to have these kinds of pyramid uh, organizations anymore. Instead of we're going to have bottom-up organizations. God's organization is always bottom-up. It's a voluntary organization that is bottom-up. Voluntary organization that is bottom-up. Because it is voluntary, it is based on what? Not based on force, and it's based on education. So anyway, all that changed. And then we have a situation now where human beings fall. And how far did they fall? Well, they fell actually to a position lower than where they started out. Because remember, when they were created, they had no sin. But now they have sin. So they are now in an unprincipled realm, unprincipled realm. And that is below creation. And this is why human beings over the centuries and millennia have looked up to angels as some beings that are sort of between them and God. Yeah, because angels are most of the angels, the majority of angels, 2/3 actually, did not commit the fall, and so those angels are in fact higher than human beings, or have been until now, higher than human beings, higher than fallen human beings for sure. So that's why they seem to shine with bright light and so forth because of that. Right. Uh, and so, so how is it possible for human beings to fall during the growing period? Is the question that we now ask. So then we need to compare the power of love and the power of the principle, the power of love and the power of the principle. It's important to remember one thing about love is that it is that God did not create any force in the universe more powerful than love. And so uh, the power of the power of love is actually greater than the power of the principle. The reason for this, of course, is that love is, it's a kind of super glue. I think uh, that example actually doesn't hold up in all cases, okay, because someone wrote me an email about how you can counteract the effects of super glue, and I forgot what they are. But anyway, there's a way. But let's go ahead. Let me keep this analogy, right? That love is like super glue. Okay. When two things are stuck together, when two people are stuck together with love, even if it is unprincipled love, it is very, very hard to pull them apart. Many parents, such as myself, have this experience, right? Where a child will uh, get stuck to someone. Uh, and it is tough to break apart that relationship because love is more powerful than the power of the principle. And so the power of love is more powerful than the principle. But then if you have the power of the principle plus faith, that is how you can stay on course. Okay? So the power of unprincipled love is greater than the power of the principle, yes, because love, whether it's a principle or unprincipled, and love just is a force. It's a force. It's like gravity or any other force, and it's not going to make a judgment as to whether it's being used in a principled way, an unprincipled, or in an unprincipled way. So that is why then you have to have the power of the principle plus faith in order to counteract the power of love. This diagram here, I wonder if we're supposed to have this kind of this. Oops. I wonder if we're supposed to have this. Oops. it seems that you should be able to. Anyway, I think this should be the opposite. Once you add faith, right? Once you add faith, this symbol should be the opposite way. I think once you have, because yeah, I think. How do you? I have a thingy there, and then. Anyway, it's not doing what I need it to do. Oh yeah, okay. I guess that's the way to do it here. Okay, all right. Yeah, I think it should be this way. Right. Uh, now I just got to get to move. There we go. Okay. Okay. And this one as well. Okay. Uh, it's not moving yet. Oh, there we go. Okay, I can do it with this. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it's supposed to go like that. All right. In my opinion, I think that's how it's supposed to be. Anyway, because when you add faith, then it's now the power of principle is now stronger than the power of love. So during the growing period, it was possible for an immature Adam and Eve to fall at any time if they encountered the power of unprincipled love, of the angel's love. And this is similar to a situation where a train, this is the example that Father would give, a train functions properly and the rail also functions properly, but when the train but the train can still be derailed if it collides, or if there's if it collides with an external force coming from a non-aligned direction. I'll change that. It's a little bit confusing. If an external force acts on the train from a non-aligned direction, okay, the train can still derail, no sense in being in the passive sense here. No sense in using passive voice. The train, but functions properly. Okay, I think they want to come with it. Okay. But but the train, excuse me, and the rail also functions properly, but the train can still derail if an external force acts on the train from a non-aligned direction. Okay. So, for example, if the train is struck by wind, for example, from the side, then it can still derail. All right. So what that wind would be then in this example would be the unprincipled love. So that is why it's important to have faith, and maintaining that faith is the portion of responsibility given to human beings, right? And it's important to note that God did not speak to the archangel. He did not say to the archangel, "Hey, you mess with my daughter, and I've got a 12 gauge shotgun here that's going to mess with you." He did not say that. Now, notice that God did speak to Cain, right? Later on, we'll get to Cain later on. And Cain is in the restoration process. Cain is in the position of the archangel, but Cain is also a human being. So Cain has a portion of responsibility. And so God did speak to Cain right here in where is that? In chapter 4, Genesis 4, right? Yeah, okay. In Genesis 4:7, God says to Cain, let's start with 6. And the Lord said unto Cain, why art thou wroth? He's wroth. In other words, he's angry because God did not accept his offering. And why is thy countenance fallen? If thou dost well, if thou doest well, if you doest well, shalt thou not be accepted. And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. So he also gave Cain, a or B, right? He can do A or he can do B. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. Okay. And then in 8, though, Cain goes ahead and kills Abel anyway. But Cain had a portion of responsibility because he is a human being. But we see God speaking to Cain, but not to the archangel about don't do this, or warning the archangel or anything like that, because the archangel does not have a portion of responsibility. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. So here we have why God set up the commandment. God gave the commandment to prevent the fall. During the period that Adam and Eve were immature, God could not govern them directly through love alone, because because they were in the stage of their lives where they needed to choose God on their own and choose to believe His word on their own. And He could not make them do that. If He made them do that, they would simply be robots, right? And they would just be like a dog or a cat. Right? The king once, in his sermon, gave the example where he said that one of his children, one time when they were very young, said, "Daddy, I think you love the dog." They had a dog at the time. You love the dog more than you love me. And the king said, "Well, the dog is my slave." Is that what you want? And the child understood. And I think that's very good. Is if God had intervened, we would be nothing more than slaves, and we would never be His children, and we would never qualify to have dominion over His creation. We would never qualify to inherit His creation. So that is why that's the importance of the portion of responsibility, and also it's also the importance of us choosing by our own choice through education, all right? Of course, through education, but choosing eventually then to keep God's commandment, not by force or the threat of force, but by our own choice, by our own understanding, because we understand that this is what we need to do. And this is what we need. And so because we understand that in the long run, this is what is going to uh, allow us to be what God created us to be. In other words, to be His children and to share in the process of creation, to have creativity and responsibility and freedom. And if we don't, then we don't have freedom. We become then slaves to sin. And that's what fallen human beings became, slaves to sin. Therefore, if they encountered a non-principled form of love during this period, it was possible for them to fall. For this reason, God gave the commandment to prevent them from falling. Right? Yeah, I think. Okay. Yeah. I have Grammarly turned on, so it's making some editorial suggestion to prevent them from falling. So the period during which the commandment is necessary, the commandment is only necessary during the growing period. So once direct dominion is reached, and in the direct dominion, then we are one with God's shimjong. What is shimjong? Shimjong is the irrepressible impulse of the heart to invest love in an object partner so as to experience love and joy. So once we are one with God's shimjong in the direct dominion, is no longer the commandment is no longer necessary. So in that situation, then because we're not going to be influenced by unprincipled love in that situation, because we understand the consequences of doing that. And so during this growing period of formation, growth, and completion, we do need to be careful and obey the commandment and have faith in God's word and in the commandment that he has given us. So then the consequences of human fall, Satan and fallen human beings, we have the world of creation and the world of the fall. The original world of creation is that God created Adam and Eve, and then Adam and Eve were to grow to become true parents and to have true children and to have true families and have royal sovereignty. And then they would create tribes and an ethnic group and nations, and then the entire world would be populated by people of goodness, the people who had never experienced a sin, never sinned, and that this would be a world that moves on love and not a pyramid institutions like we have today, but rather bottom up voluntary institutions and relationships. But but God, and so God gave the commandment in Genesis 2:17. And so and this belief, in other words, faith, would have brought about this world. But what we have, though, instead is the world of the fall. That is, and it's centered. The actions of Adam and Eve were centered on Satan, centered on Satan. And so then they gave birth to children of Satan who inherited the effects of the fall, the fallen nature, and the original sin that came into the world as a result of the fall. And so then this created a world of evil, and it created a hell on earth and hell in heaven, hell in the spirit world as well. The kingdom of heaven on earth would have naturally led to the kingdom of heaven in heaven, because when human beings completed our lives on earth, the lives in our physical body, then we would naturally transition to the spirit world, and we would continue those relationships of goodness in the spirit world, and so there would also be kingdom of heaven in heaven. And understand, of course, clearly that physical death is part of God's original design. The physical body was not designed in the first place to last forever. If you imagine what would happen if all human beings lived forever, the fall had not occurred and all human beings lived forever, that would be a big mess, wouldn't it? And we need to say this because there is a rather large group in Korea right now that believes that their founder, their leader, is not going to die. He's not going to die physically. So that's a very interesting situation. We will see what happens with them once, of course, their leader does die. I mean, we're pretty sure that that's going to happen. So anyway, we are maintaining relationships with them right now, in the hopes that when this happens, that they will actually decide that maybe Father's teaching is superior to their own, and they will come to Father's teaching. Anyway, we'll see what happens with that. So human beings in this world of the fall are reborn as Satan's offspring. Adam and Eve were reborn as Satan's offspring, and Satan is the parent of fallen human beings. And so we then pass on original sin and fallen nature to our children, and Satan is the ruler of this world. And so that's why Jesus said, no, my kingdom is not of this world, right? Because it is not of the world that is ruled by Satan. It's going to be a new Jerusalem, but that does not mean that a new Jerusalem, a new world, is going to descend from heaven. It's going to be the same earth. It's just that it's going to be a earth that is now under God's dominion, and so in that sense, it's going to be a new world, a new Jerusalem. Let's see, where did Jesus say this? That is in John 18:36, where Jesus is being tried by Pontius Pilate. And Jesus says, if my kingdom is not of this world, if my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, but my kingdom is not of this world. Right. And then Christianity interprets this as saying that it means that his kingdom is not going to be earthly. But that's wrong, because God created the earth. And God is not going to say, okay, well, Satan, okay, you got the earth. And so I'll just take the spirit world, and you can have the earth. No, it doesn't work that way. God is not going to give up. He's not going to give up dominion of the earth forever, right? So this is an important point that many people in Christianity do not understand. That God's kingdom is earthly, but it is going to be a new world in the sense that there will be a new relationship among people and a new relationship between human beings and God, and a new relationship between human beings and the archangel. So this will be the original world that God created, right? Uh, God created a world that was supposed to be a world of goodness. And that's going to happen. That's going to happen. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it will soon. It will happen. So those are the consequences of the fall. And so then these are the three great reversals that happen, reversing the lineage, um, the the lineage had changed from God's lineage to Satan's lineage, and so then it has to be reversed back now from Satan's lineage to God's lineage. The reverse of the right of ownership, the right of the ownership now passed from God to Satan, and that right of ownership now needs to be reversed back to God. And the reverse of the realm of heart, I think we can just go ahead and make that Shimjong. Just make it in italics. Okay. Our original realm of original nature, practicing a life by practicing a life of attendance. And the three liberations: liberation from Satan's lineage, to be eradicating Satan's lineage, and this is done through the blessing. And I think those squares, I think, are little symbols that maybe my font does not have. And liberation from satanic governance, and we do that by liberating ourselves from that by practicing a principled life, and liberation from a satanic lifestyle and environment, and we will build a Chanyahu in that way. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and see. Okay. Oops. Let me take time just to do this. So then this is done through the realization of true families, which has to be done by each individual. This is why I say it's a bottom-up organization. And then creation of God's homeland and creation of the Chunju Pyeongwa Tongyurku, nation of cosmic peace and unity. Or let's take Chun. Okay, let's take Chun, and let's take this syllable Il. Okay, and let's take this syllable Kup. Okay, so since this is such a long name, we'll just abbreviate it this way: Chun Il Kup, and that's how the word Chunyu came into being. All right. And the translation of the long name is Nation of Cosmic Peace and Unity, or Kingdom of Cosmic Peace and Unity, Chanyagut. The nation can be of many forms, right? It can have many forms. It can be a republic, constitutional monarchy, and all sorts of things, but it's going to be a kingdom. Okay. Satan's activities in the human world. How is it that Satan is able to act in the human world? Satan has, of course, many evil spirits surrounding him. And then one of those evil spirits, or maybe several, I think many times, evil spirits will have a relationship with the spirit self of a human being in the physical world, and then uh, the natural world. The spirit world is also a natural world. So this is spirit world is also part of the natural world in the physical world, and then this has give and receive with the spirit self of the human being, and so then that's how evil thoughts then are created, and then that leads to evil actions. And so Luke 22:3 says that Satan entered Judas Iscariot, and this is how that happened. So Satan had a relationship with the evil spirit, and then the evil spirit influenced Judas Iscariot's spirit self, and then that spirit self influenced Judas's physical self, and that's how that evil action came about, where Judas Iscariot sold Jesus to the Jewish establishment. So, what is sin? The definition of sin: sin is a violation of heavenly law, which is committed when a person forms a common base with Satan and sets a condition allowing give and receive action with him. Which is sin is a violation of human law committed when a person forms a common base with Satan and sets a condition allowing give and receive action. No, dismiss. Give and receive action with Satan. So then there are four types of sin. There's the original sin, of course, which is the root of all sin. But then there's also hereditary sin and collective sin and individual sin. Okay. And fallen nature, when the archangel betrayed God, let me see if I can increase this a bit. I think the writing is a bit small for you. Okay. When the archangel betrayed God and formed blood ties with Eve through a sexual relationship, certain tendencies, inclinations, and dispositions and temperaments spontaneously arose and were passed on to Eve and Adam. These became the fundamental nature, giving rise to fallen nature. And so we have God, and we have Adam, and Adam was supposed to have dominion over the archangel. Supposed to have a dominion over the archangel. But then the archangel left its position and became Satan. Well, let's add a bit more. Became Satan. And then Satan influenced Eve, and then Eve influenced Adam. So this relationship here was broken, and then the angel came up to this position here next to Eve, and then influenced Eve, or had dominion over Eve, and then Eve took dominion over Adam. So the original nature is that to take God's viewpoint and love from God's viewpoint. And so the archangel was supposed to love Adam and Eve from God's viewpoint, but he did not, or it did not. So the fallen nature was the inability to love from God's viewpoint, and this is jealousy and envy. These are the symptoms of that fallen nature. And so in order to restore that now, we need to love people from God's viewpoint. And then also the archangel was supposed to allow Adam and Eve to be his mediator between himself and God. And instead, he left his position and took over that position. Instead, he did not want Adam and Eve to be the mediator like this. And so then he left his position, and the symptoms here is rashness and intemperance. And so in order to restore this, we need to allow someone who is in the position of Adam to us to be our mediator with God. And the third is dominion. Uh, Archangel was supposed to allow, or was supposed to be dominated uh, by Adam and Eve. And he was supposed to obey Adam and Eve, but he reversed that dominion, and the symptom of that is arrogance. And so in restoration, we need to practice obedience and submission to God and to those who have been appointed by God. And in the original nature was the multiplication of goodness, but the archangel multiplied evil instead. And the symptom of this is stubbornness. And so we need to then give sacrifice and offering so as to restore this point. So we'll be talking about these restoration very much in part 2 of the principle and in the restoration providence. Eventually, this chart needs to be fulfilled, and it will be done. So, and that will happen in the restoration providence. So let's talk about freedom and the human fall. The principal perspective on the meaning of freedom. So first of all, there's no freedom apart from the principle. And you know, this is one that Chahan would often use. And basically, she also, I think she also tried to use it on me when I met her, that there's no freedom apart from the principle. So basically what she means is you're not free unless you're my slave. It's really sad. I laugh, but it's funny and sad that she could live with Father for 52 years and understand so little about the principle. And there are just a few phrases that she knows, right? Something like indemnity, for example. She knows the phrase indemnity. And then she also knows this one, no freedom apart from the principle. But this simply means that I think traffic laws are the best way to explain this. It's when you obey traffic laws. That's one way to explain it. There's another way too, but it's when you obey traffic laws that you have freedom. If there's an intersection, all right, and no one is obeying the traffic laws. Let's say, for example, if there's a lightning strike and the traffic lights go out, and people just enter the intersection anytime they want, and there's an accident or there are multiple accidents, and the intersection becomes clogged and nobody can move, and there's no freedom there. So in order for there to be freedom, people have to accept that there are laws and rules, and you have to obey the traffic lights. Also, I think another example is when you're playing a musical instrument. I'm really envious of people who are able to be free. They can sit in front of a piano and they are free, and they can play many, many different tunes, classical, pop, or whatever. That's really a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I wish that I could do that. But in order to be able to do that, what have they done? They've learned the principle of the piano or the particular instrument that they are playing, and they have practiced. They have practiced many, 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 many hours within that principle, and they follow the principle of that instrument. And so, with that principle, they are free. Okay? So then here in the principle, freedom, but so in the mind, it has to be free will, but also free action. There's no freedom without responsibility. Human beings perfect themselves by completing their portion of responsibility by the power of free will. Accordingly, there is no freedom without responsibility. Freedom without responsibility is not freedom. It is self-indulgence and dissolution. So freedom without responsibility just creates chaos, right? And like I mentioned in that case of the traffic intersection, there's also no freedom without accomplishment. So through free will, the fruits of action are perfected so that human beings can obtain accomplishments that return joy to God. So there has to be some result. You cannot just sit around in bed all day and say, I'm free, I'm free, I'm free. You have to do something with that freedom. and then you are free. Then you are truly free. And then this is very instructive here. So there is a line of death here, and the human beings in unprincipled love, they've crossed over to death, and now they have a relationship with Satan. And now, with true love, human beings need to cross back over that line of death, and then to receive life from God again. So, what is this? Okay, well, I think this is supposed to be an arrow. Okay, so a human being jumps into a pool of water. uh, this is not freedom. This is not freedom when a human being jumps into a pool of water, because Father's teaching is that when free, human beings will always choose life over death. So why did Eve choose death? Because she placed herself under Satan's dominion, and she was no longer free because she did not believe. That's why to have freedom, you have to have the principle. There has to be principle and there has to be faith in order to overcome the power of unprincipled love. And so when human beings appear to be choosing death, they're doing that because they are not free, and they are not free to choose death. They are under the power of the principle. And the reasons that God gave human beings freedom moves human beings to take up responsibility given to them through the principle of creation and seek substantial outcomes that bring God joy. And free action stemming from free will, good accomplishments bring joy to God. So, and then desire, the original nature of creation desire is the original nature of creation given by God to human beings. Of course, there's desire. Without desire, there would be no development. If we were just always satisfied with the status quo, but we're not, so we go and we want to make a better mousetrap. We want to make something better than what we have right now. So this is how human society develops, through freedom and through creativity, but also through responsibility. And the purpose of creation and joy is the experience of when desire is fulfilled. So if human beings had no desire, human beings could not experience joy, and we would not have a desire to receive the love of God. We would not have a desire to live. We would not have a desire to practice goodness. We would not have a desire to develop ourselves. So neither God's purpose of creation nor providence of restoration could be fulfilled, and human society could not be sustained, nor would it develop without desire. So desire in and of itself, this is something, it's the original nature that God has given us. We want to improve. We want to be something better than what we are. And eventually, this is why everyone is going to return to God, because God, eventually, God, or in our relationship with God, is what allows us to be what God originally created us to be. All right, let's see here. This little thing is. All right, and here the reason God did not intervene in the fall. So the first reason, to maintain the absoluteness and perfection of the principle. So I'm sure you're familiar with this chart, but we have the growing period. And the growing period is a period of indirect dominion, realm of God's governance over results through the principle. In other words, God governs based on what is made available to him. And whenever something happens, when someone does something, God will take from that anything that might be principled. And so, to give an example, let's see what example now. Well, in any situation, God is looking for something that is a principle. So, you know, I can't think of anything right now. But right now, but the creation, the rest of creation, the dogs and the cats and the animals, and the angels too, by the way, they grow to perfection through the principle and through governance, the autonomy governance through the principle, and they grow to perfection without their own responsibility. Dogs and cats, pine trees, um, daffodils, whatever it is, the seeds contain the DNA, and given the proper amount of water and sun and the proper amount of nutrients and so forth like that in the soil or in the environment, they're going to grow to what the DNA says they're going to grow to. And the human beings are the same way in terms of our physical bodies. But the human beings also have a spirit self, and that spirit self has to be created by our portion of responsibility, by receiving God's word and God's love, and then, as we talked about already in chapter 1, by putting that word and that love into action. And so it's become God's perfect object of love, and God being the perfect subject, and then this will be the direct dominion of true love. So in the indirect dominion, God has governance only over results through the principle. And so in the principle plus human portion of responsibility, then gives rise to the accomplishment of God's will. God's word, 95%, it is his responsibility to give his word and his love. I would also add God's word and love, and then the human responsibility, 5%. And these numbers are just to indicate who's doing the heavy lifting, right? God is doing the heavy lifting. But human responsibility is also there, although it's relatively small compared to God's responsibility. But compared to our own ability, it is 100% of our ability. So through this combination of God's word and the human responsibility, we have it resulting as the creation of character. And then this gives us the creativity as a second creator, and qualification to be God's children, and also qualification to exercise dominion over creation. So if we did not create our own character through our own decision and our own choice, we would not be qualified to exercise dominion over creation, or to exercise creativity, or to be qualified as God's children. And so that is why the portion of responsibility is an extremely precious thing that was given only to human beings. Nobody else, no other entity in creation has received this. Only us, only us, only us. So this is why I say, if there are aliens, okay, if there are, like we see in Star Trek or whatever, with all sorts of, the pointy ears or whatever, they do not have a portion of responsibility. And they are not qualified to be God's children. They are not qualified to exercise dominion of creation, and they do not have creativity. And they are part of the physical world that was created for the benefit of, for the sake of God's children, for the sake of Adam and Eve and Adam and Eve's descendants, for the sake of us. All right. So even though these pointy-eared aliens may be scientifically more advanced than us, if that happens, but that's not important. What's important is that we have a portion of responsibility which we fulfill, and we become the perfect object of God's love, and we are the children of God. And so if and when they come to Earth, we can tell them that and say, okay, uh, you know, what took you so long? And now you're here to serve us, and so forth and so on. I don't know. And I don't know if they're ever going to come. I kind of doubt it, but who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Um, Father has already said that the the what is it the flying saucers and so forth are spiritual phenomena. Anyway, so here, so God alone. So the second reason that God gave uh, that God did not intervene in the fall. I'm sorry. So that God did not intervene in the fall was so that God alone could be the creator. So if God intervened in the fall, then it would be recognizing Satan as a second creator, and uh, so then Satan's world of sin would become permanent. And God only governs over that which has been created. If God intervened or acted to govern the fall, it would assign creative nature to Satan. And Satan would love this. Satan would love that. So that's why he keeps trying to tell us that, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I was responsible for the fall too. I had a portion of responsibility of the fall. Yeah, 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 yeah. Because he wants to have a portion of responsibility, right? Because that would that would give him creative nature. That would make him human. No, 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 no. You cannot have that. You cannot have that. You cannot have that. The fall, sin, and hell are all things that Satan created. Therefore, if God interfered with these, it would result in God recognizing Satan as the second creator who created evil. Accordingly, in order that God alone exists as the creator, God had no choice but to not intervene in the fall of human beings. I don't know if the word created here is really what we need here. I want to go back to the Korean and see if that's what the Reverend Yu used as well. Okay. God had no choice but not to intervene in the fall of human beings. Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay, I guess we have time for one more slide. Okay. And then the third reason, is this the last reason? Yes, it's the last reason. Okay. The third reason is to establish human beings in the position to govern over God's creation. And so, God, if God, so we also have the same here. And if God directly governed over human beings who are still within the realm of indirect dominion, human beings would be unable to fulfill their portion of responsibility. Human beings would be unable to inherit the creative nature of the Creator, would be unable to become God's children, and human beings would be unable to attain the qualification to govern over the created world. For these reasons, God did not interfere in the fall, so that He could establish human beings as the lords of creation. Okay. And so then this chart explains that. So here, of course, so we have the same situation where human beings need to perfect our character. Our physical bodies grow just like any other part of the physical creation through the principle, but then our character though needs to grow through our portion of responsibility by receiving God's love and His Word, by putting that into action in our daily lives, but through the given to receive action of between spirit self and physical self, and then going through this the three stages of formation, growth, and completion, and through the indirect dominion. So we need to grow by our own choice. If God directly governed human beings who were still within the realm of direct, okay, that's good. By our own choice, we need to choose to follow God, to follow His teachings, and to have faith in Him. And that is um, the reason that restoration has taken such a long time. Right? Anthropologists and archaeologists are still trying to figure out, how long human beings have been on the earth. And of course, there were humanoid-like or humanoid figures, Neanderthals and all sorts of others. But there was one point in which God put His breath into into human beings, and then that was the origin. That was the beginning of human history at that point, where human beings came to have a spirit self. So those original humanoids that the anthropologists talk about, presumably they did not have a spirit self. And anthropology, of course, is not able to answer this question. What was the first human figure that had a spirit self? When did that happen? Right? When did that happen? How many hundreds of thousands of years ago did that happen? Uh, but that is something that perhaps we will find out uh, by and by when the morning comes and all the saints of God are gathered home. All right. Okay. God bless. God bless. Till next time. God bless. Godspeed, and may His kingdom come quickly.